What you are about to hear now is not a theory or an interpretation, it is a warning. For over 100 years, a secret has been kept deep within the Vatican. A secret that, according to reports, could shake the faith of millions. The third prophecy of Fatima, many thought it had already been revealed in the year 2000, but it was not. Now, in 2025, everything indicates that the true content of this prophecy has begun to be fulfilled. What is happening right now within the Vatican is proof of this. When you understand what is about to come to light, you will realize why you cannot ignore this video, not until the end, because the information you are about to discover has been kept secret for over a century. If you miss it now, you may not have another opportunity. In your view, Pope Francis is the bishop dressed in white mentioned in Fatima, living in the hour of trial. Or do you think this prophecy will still be fulfilled in the future? Leave your answer below. Pope Francis, the leader of the Catholic Church, is on the verge of death, sick, isolated and surrounded by unprecedented tension. But before his voice is silenced forever, he said something that changed everything. He broke the silence about what the Vatican tried to hide for decades. And you need to know what it revealed, because the consequences affect not only the Church, but each one of us. According to the words of the Pope himself, the time of the test has come, and this is not a symbolic phrase. We are talking about a real event, something that is already underway, something that, according to many scholars, is directly connected to the end of times as described in Fatima, Portugal in 1917. The Vatican is on alert, and it is not for political reasons. It is because of a truth so disconcerting that not even the religious leaders themselves know how to deal with it. There is a hidden document, an undisclosed content of the third prophecy of Fatima, that was only shown to a select group within the Holy See. A text that speaks of destruction, apostasy and a collapse that would begin within the Vatican itself. A text that Pope Francis now admits is being fulfilled before our eyes, and there is no longer any way to hide it. For years, the world was led to believe that the hidden prophecy of Fatima had been fulfilled in the attack on Pope John Paul II. But why then did Pope Francis, in his hospital bed, refer to himself like the bishop dressed in white? This is not a metaphor, it is a code, a sign that the last part of the prophecy is coming true at this very moment. And if you still think that this can wait, you will want to hear what has been revealed in the last few days, because if all this is true, and the facts are accumulating rapidly, we are already living the apocalypse predicted in Fatima. If the time of the test has already begun, what do you think we should do as believers? Resist in silence or act now before it is too late? Comment your choice and let's strengthen this chain of prayer and reflection. This video is not a theological reflection. It is an exposition of the facts that the Vatican does not want you to know, but the truth can no longer be postponed. And if you leave now, you will miss the key piece that connects all these events. Pope Francis, weakened with difficulty breathing, asked for preparation for a new successor. This has never happened so directly, and further stated that he fears that he will not survive, that he fears that the Church is entering its darkest hour. And that is why you need to watch until the end, because I am convinced that the third prophecy of Fatima is not an ancient warning. It is what we are experiencing now. If you want to understand why the Vatican is collapsing, what could happen to the Catholic Church in the coming weeks, and what decision each of us will need to make very soon, you cannot leave here. The truth is about to be revealed, and only those who stay until the end will understand what is really at stake. The Vatican has faced moments of tension before, persecutions, scandals, internal conflicts, but it has never been like this. What is happening now goes beyond politics. It goes beyond the health of Pope Francis. It is as if the very structure of the Church were about to give way. The question that many are afraid to ask, but that needs to be asked, is why now? What has changed? What do they know and are not saying? In recent weeks, the corridors of the Vatican have become a cold, silent terrain where hurried footsteps resound like echoes of a time that is running out. There are no more formal smiles. There are no more optimistic speeches. What can be perceived, even from a distance, is an environment of waiting, a tense, suffocating wait. And this is not just because of Francis' illness. There is something bigger. Something that has grown underground, within the Vatican, and now it emerges for those who have the courage to look. Pope Francis, at 88 years old, is isolated in a special wing of the Gemelli Hospital with double pneumonia. The doctors do not hide the seriousness of the situation, but what is most impressive is not his physical condition, but what he said shortly before being admitted. He called his closest cardinals, among them important names, men who decide the direction of the Church, and there, between lowered glances and trembling hands, he made an unprecedented request that they immediately begin preparations for his succession. This is not common. Popes, even on the verge of death, rarely pronounce these words. They trust in providence, but Francis does not. He acts as if he knows that time is up, and it was at that moment that he said the phrase that froze the room. The time of the test had arrived, he murmured with a broken voice. The cardinals understood the weight, and if you follow this story, you know that this phrase has an origin. It is not improvised, it is not the outburst of a sick man. This expression is in the third prophecy of Fatima. The documents that the Vatican revealed in 2000 speak of a bishop dressed in white who walks among the rubble, surrounded by martyrs before he was assassinated. At that time, they said it was a reference to John Paul II and the 1981 attack, but there is something wrong with this explanation because Francis himself, on at least 2 different occasions, has called himself this bishop dressed in white, and now, sick and isolated, he uses these words again, not to tell a story, but to say what is happening now within the Vatican. The papal succession is no longer a long-term plan, it is an emergency. And that is not all. There are reports leaked by Vatican sources that speak of secret meetings, heated debates about the true extent of the prophecy that Lucia wrote in 1944, sealed and delivered to the Vatican with clear instructions that it be read in 1960. But when the date arrived, there was silence, and since then, what was revealed did not convince everyone. Some priests, like Malachi Martin, claim to have read the version, and according to them, the worst was never disclosed. Pope Francis knows this. He has always known. Since he was elected, he brought changes, he made enemies inside and outside the church, but kept this secret until now. And the reason why he decided to speak is simple. He believes that there will be no more time. Now, the Vatican is on alert, not only because of the rights of succession, but because they know that the entire world is about to witness something unprecedented. The greatest crisis of faith in recent centuries. A collapse that does not begin outside, but within the Church itself. The Pope himself admitted this when he spoke of a time when many will lose their faith, an apostasy that begins in the heart of the Vatican. And this changes everything. If what was said in Fatima is happening now, then the next steps are already underway. The Vatican no longer has control. The Pope can no longer hide. And you, who follow this story, need to know. What has been shown so far is just the surface. What comes next is something that no Pope before has had the courage to reveal completely. Nothing has started now. The story that is unfolding before our eyes was announced more than a century ago in a place forgotten by the world, but not by heaven. Fatima, Portugal. The year was 1917. In a scenario of war, hunger and despair, 3 children were herding their sheep as they did every day. Lucia, Francisco and Jacinta, 3 names that until that moment had not been known. They meant nothing to anyone, but on that particular day, their lives and the fate of the world would change forever. At noon, while they were tending their flocks in the Covadonga area, something happened. The sky brightened. Not like a dawn, not like the ordinary brightness of the sun. It was a light that hurt the eyes, but did not blind. It was a call that did not use words, but imposed itself by force. And then she appeared. A woman dressed in white, brighter than the day itself. She did not say her name, but the hearts of the children recognized her. It was the Virgin Mary. But what followed was not a consolation, or a sweet message. There were no empty promises, or blessings of hope. What she brought were warnings. 3 secrets. 3 messages that should not be delivered all at once. The first was a vision of hell. The children saw the fate of the souls. They screamed. They cried. And when the vision ended, they were never the same. It was as if they forever carried with them the memory of something that no human being should see. The second message was an even more concrete warning. The First World War would end, but if the world did not repent, another war would come, an even worse one. The Virgin spoke of great suffering, nations destroyed, millions dead, and history confirms, in 1939 the Second World War began exactly as announced, a conflict that challenged humanity, surpassing in destruction everything that humanity had ever witnessed. But the third message, this was different. It should not be told immediately. Mary said that it should be revealed to the world in 1960. Why? Because in that year, it would be easier to understand what would come. But when 1960 arrived, the Vatican read the content and silenced it. The third prophecy of Fatima was not read in public, no official statement, no clear revelation, just a warning: the world is not ready to hear. And what could be so devastating that not even the Church, with all its power and influence, would reveal it? Some reports say that one of them would have turned pale when finishing reading, and that another would have stayed for hours in silence. Time passed, the first parts were known. The theory is that the envelope was sealed, locked with 7 keys. Others believe that only 2 or 3 men in the world had access to the original content, and each of them, when speaking about the subject, left disturbing clues. Father Malachi Martin, one of the few who had read the entire document, said that the third prophecy spoke not of a future event, but of an irreversible process, a collapse that would begin within the Church itself, an apostasy in which the leaders themselves would stop believing, and that when that moment arrived, humanity would face its final test. Here we are in 2025. Pope Francis, who is ill, calls this time the hour of testing. He speaks as if he knows that the prophecy is not just a forgotten text, but a sentence that is being fulfilled. Now the Vatican is on alert, and for the first time, there are voices within the Church itself that admit that perhaps the content revealed in 2000 was not the whole story. Perhaps what still remains hidden is the true center of this message. Now it is necessary to go back to that field in Fatima in 1917 and review what those children heard. They were warned that if man did not change his path, what was to come would be unimaginable. Wars, persecutions, famine, crises, all of this has already happened, but there is something that has not yet been fulfilled. Something worse. And if Francis, by declaring himself the bishop dressed in white, is assuming the final role of this vision, then the next step of this prophecy is so devastating that the Vatican has resisted disclosing it until now. What was seen in Fatima was not just a vision of the future, it was a warning, and no one can say for sure if there is still time. In 1944, Sister Lucia, the last survivor of the 3 children of Fatima, put on paper what would be called the most dangerous secret of the Vatican. She wrote with a clear recommendation that it be delivered to the Pope, and that the world would know it in 1960. Not before, not after. In 1960, she said, the signs would be clear. The content was sealed in an envelope, sent to Rome, and kept under maximum surveillance. Only a few knew of the physical existence of that document, much less its contents. In 1960, the world waited. Many remembered the prophesied date. Curious theologians, journalists, and faithful began to question. And then came the official answer: there would be no revelation. The document was opened, read, and locked anew. The words of Lucia apparently did not reach the ears of humanity at that time. The reason? A brief, dry, and enigmatic pronouncement of Pope John XXIII. We do not think it appropriate to disclose it now. The questions immediately arose. Why would the Vatican defy the instructions given by the Virgin Mary herself? Why keep secret something that theoretically should guide the destiny of the faithful? And even more disturbing, what was in that text that made the Pope believe that the world was not ready? Sources close to the pontiff at the time say that John 23 was deeply shaken when he finished reading. He closed the envelope without saying a word, he put it back in a safe, and ordered absolute silence. And it remained that way for decades. The popes who came after, Paul VI, John Paul I, and John Paul II, read the same document, and all, without exception, decided to keep it a secret. Only John Paul II risked revealing part of the content in the year 2000, saying that the prophecy had been fulfilled in the attack that almost took his life in 1981. But even at that time, many realized that there was something strange, that version was incomplete, too superficial to justify so much silence over the years. What could be so threatening? Father Malachi Martin, theologian and former employee of the Holy See itself, stated in interviews that he had access to the real content of the third prophecy of Fatima. According to him, the document did not only speak of an attack on the Pope. It described a spiritual collapse within the Catholic Church itself. A time of internal betrayal, apostasy, and division. A time when the leaders of the faith themselves would stop believing in divine truth, leading the flock into error and darkness. According to Malachi Martin, the prophecy spoke of an event on a global scale. A chaos that was not only spiritual, but also social and geopolitical, and would hit humanity in an irreversible way. He warned years before he died that this process had already begun, and that the ecclesiastical leaders did not want the people to know. They did not want to panic. They did not want to lose control. Other voices within the clergy supported the same idea. Cardinal Silvio, another important name within the Roman Curia, stated that what was revealed to the public was nothing more than a smaller part of the true content. He said that there was much more, and that what was missing was what really frightened the Vatican. But it paid off its debts. And here we are in 2025, seeing what seems to be the fulfillment of every word of that hidden text. Pope Francis, once a reformer, now a man consumed by fragility and the weight of knowledge he carries. His decision to immediately begin the procedures to choose a successor is not casual. It is the act of someone who knows that something is about to happen, something so big, so disruptive, that he will not have the strength to stop it. The secret meetings taking place now in the Vatican are just the beginning. Old documents are being reviewed, archives closed for decades are being reopened. There is a widespread feeling that time has run out, and that what was kept secret for more than a century can no longer be hidden. The Vatican has opted for silence out of fear, but now fear is not enough to contain the advance of events. The third prophecy of Fatima was never just a warning, it is a sentence, and the time to react is running out. Most people did not pay attention when he first said it in 2017, during the celebration of the centenary of the apparitions of Fatima. Amid prayers and speeches, Pope Francis referred to himself as the bishop dressed in white. Many saw it as a symbolic gesture, a tribute to Lucia's words. Others didn't understand anything. But those who studied the third prophecy of Fatima in depth immediately understood that it wasn't just a casual mention, it was a key. And now in 2025, with his health failing, breathing with difficulty, and aware that he might not have much time, he repeated the words. Only this time the context was different. It wasn't a celebration, it was a final testimony. And he didn't speak to crowds, but to a closed circle of cardinals, people who until that moment had maintained hope that the situation was just a temporary crisis, until they heard Francis repeat in a weak, but firm voice, "I am the bishop dressed in white. And this is the hour of the test." The phrase echoed like a sentence because everyone then knew what it meant. Lucia's vision spoke of a man dressed in white walking through a city in ruins, surrounded by the corpses of martyrs before being killed by a group of soldiers. For years it was believed that this vision referred to the 1981 attack on John Paul II, but Francis never accepted this explanation. And by declaring himself that bishop, he not only questions the official version given by the Vatican in 2000, he directly challenges the one built to calm the Church and the faithful. Why repeat these words now? Because Francis is seeing the signs. He sees from inside the Vatican the approaching collapse, the apostasy that grows among the clergy, the division that corrodes the Church itself, the silent distancing of the faithful, and a world that walks aimlessly, lost in wars, crises and catastrophes that do not cease. He knows that he is at the center of the prophecy, not by choice, but because the time has come. By declaring himself the bishop dressed in white, he admits that the third part of the message of Fatima is now being fulfilled, and he is the witness, or perhaps the last victim, of what is yet to come. In Lucia's vision, the bishop walks through a devastated city, praying for the souls of the dead before being struck and falling. A final scene, but what few realize is that this image symbolizes more than the death of a man. It represents the fall of the spiritual leadership of the Church. The moment when the shepherd is wounded and the flock scatters. When Francis pronounces these words, he is not speaking of himself as just a man in pain. He is telling the world what was prophesied has happened. I am living it now, and you need to understand what will come next. The consequences of this statement have not yet been fully understood. Some cardinals believe that Francis, pressured by his own illness, no longer knows what he is saying. Others, more attentive, know that no pope would ever say this without full awareness of the weight of his words. And if Francis is the bishop dressed in white from Lucia's vision, what comes next is inevitable: ruins, martyrdom, collapse. The Vatican is officially out of time, and what was a secret kept for over a century is now revealed to a few, like cracks in the wall before a collapse. Behind the scenes, many prepare for what comes next. No one within the walls of the Vatican ignores the meaning of what Francis said, the hour of the test. That moment is not far away, it has begun, and the world needs to decide, will it close its eyes as they have done for decades, or will it face the truth before it is too late? When pronouncing the words, "This is the hour of the test," Pope Francis was not offering a metaphor for difficult times. He was not talking about a crisis of public opinion or a moment of political turbulence. His voice, weakened by illness, brought a dark certainty. He was referring to the same expression used in the third prophecy of Fatima, where the darkest time for the Christian faith and for humanity itself was announced. But what exactly does this hour of testing mean? According to reports from Pope Francis's inner circle, he described this moment as a period in which faith would be tested as never before, not by declared enemies from outside, but by an internal betrayal, a rupture within the Vatican itself, where those who should protect the doctrine would begin to corrupt it. A time in which many within the church would abandon the revealed truth, dragging multitudes into the darkness without realizing the abyss ahead. He spoke of a spiritual collapse initiated not by the common faithful, but by the leading pastors, who lost the sense of mission, exchanging the salvation of souls for the preservation of power, for the vanity of human ideologies, for the fear of losing control. Francis knows that it is not just about falling numbers in the attendance rates at Mass. He knows that what is before the Church is a frontal attack on faith, starting with the high clergy. The vision of Fatima spoke of a time in which error would spread within the Church itself, a crisis so deep that it would make it seem as if the light of truth had been extinguished. Francis, in his fragile state, can no longer disguise that he recognizes this scenario, and that is why he calls this the hour of the test, because it will not be just a fight for the preservation of temples or traditions. It will be a battle for faith itself, a battle where the greatest enemy is not outside, but sitting in the chairs of ecclesiastical power. For decades, talking about these possibilities was considered a conspiracy theory, something to be dismissed with a condescending smile. But now, with the Pope stating this publicly, no one can claim ignorance. He himself admits that the Church is in its greatest test since its foundation. Francis did not name names, did not directly accuse any cardinal or bishop, but his words make it clear that there is an infiltration, a deviation, a loss of direction that threatens to destroy what is left of the Catholic faith. He speaks of a division that will set clergy against clergy, bishops against bishops, faithful against faithful, and that is the beginning of the end. This division is evident. Internal disputes have never been so intense. Accusations of financial scandals, abuses, and moral deviations have exploded in recent years. And now, with the Pope at death's door, the fear of a power vacuum grows. But for Francis, the real fear is not in politics or in the disputes for positions. His fear is for the soul of the Church, threatened from within, exactly as the prophecy predicted. And it is not only within the Vatican that this tension is felt. Outside of it, the world seems to echo the same disorder: wars, natural disasters, global economic crises, a scenario where the external chaos reflects the internal collapse. The time of the test, as described by Francis, is a moment in which men will need to decide in whom and in what to believe, a time in which many will lose faith, and worse, will not realize it until it is too late. Francis used this expression with the conviction of someone who knows that there is no more time to prepare the ground. He understands that the process is already underway, that the warnings given in Fatima were ignored, and that now all that remains is to face what was predicted. What he did not say, and perhaps does not need to say, is that if he is the bishop dressed in white, and if this is really the time of the test, the next stage of the prophecy is the ruin, the fall of the Church as we know it. And many believe that this could happen while Francis is still alive. The question that remains is who will remain standing when this test is over, and especially, what will come after it. For more than a century, the third prophecy of Fatima was treated as an enigma. Officially, the Vatican declared that everything that had been said by Lucia in 1917 had been revealed. They said that the document released in the year 2000 was the entire vision that Our Lady had entrusted to the Portuguese children. A bishop dressed in white walking through a city in ruins, killed by a group of soldiers. A terrifying scene, yes. But many soon realized that there was something strange about that revelation. Something incomplete. If that were really the full content of the secret, why did the previous popes keep it secret for so long? Why was there hesitation? Why, when opening the envelope in 1960, did Pope John XXIII refuse to release the message, saying only that it was not the right time? Above all, why does Francis, now in 2025, act as if the true message was still hidden? The answer, for those who are paying attention, is clear. What was released to the public was not the full content, and the evidence for this is accumulating in a way that is increasingly impossible to ignore. Cardinals and theologians close to the Curia have already raised this hypothesis more than once. Cardinal Silvio Oddi, for example, declared that what was revealed made no sense. It was not logical that a document capable of causing so much fear in previous popes was just a symbolic account of an attack that had already occurred. Something was missing. Something much bigger. Something more devastating. Father Malachi Martin, who worked in the Vatican itself and had read the original document, was even more direct. The full content of the third part speaks of apostasy at the highest level of the Catholic Church. A total abandonment of the faith that will come from within. He stated that the secret revealed in 2000 was just a piece of the truth, carefully edited so as not to cause panic. But why hide it? Why withhold the truth, knowing that the prophecy was given to the world as a warning? The answer is simple and disturbing: fear. Fear of collapse. Fear of losing control over the faithful. Fear of provoking an exodus of terrified souls in the face of the fact that the leadership itself of the Church could one day be the source of error. And now, in 2025, Francis no longer has the strength to maintain this curtain of silence. In closed meetings, he admitted that the content revealed is not complete. There is a part of the message written by Lucia that remains locked in the most secret vaults of the Vatican, and that in it there is a final warning not only about the Church, but about all humanity. According to internal sources, this final part of the prophecy speaks of a global spiritual collapse followed by a time of unprecedented tribulation. The loss of faith would not be limited to the Catholic Church, but would spread to all beliefs. There would be a time of confusion so dense that the truth would become indistinguishable from lies. And in this chaos, a new order would emerge, promising stability, but at the cost of the soul. This is the true essence of the third prophecy of Fatima, a warning about a deception that will come from within, disguised as good, that will seduce even the chosen ones. A deception that will lead many to abandon the true faith without even realizing it. Francis knows this, and his insistence on warning about the time of the test is his way of saying that the prophecy is being fulfilled now. He understands that his time is running out, and he may no longer be here to see the outcome. But his last words indicate that he fears that the next leader of the Church is already committed to this internal betrayal. What remains stored in the Vatican's vaults is not merely an ancient text. It is a warning that has transformed into a reflection of the present. As the Pope battles to maintain clarity amid his illness, he strives to open the world's eyes to a truth that has been delayed for far too long. The silence is finally breaking. Yet, the question each of us must answer is straightforward. Are we prepared to hear what was truly said at Fatima, Or do we prefer to cling to a more comfortable version that no longer holds weight? Francisco Frac TZ is no longer here to claim knowledge. He left something else behind, and what we must understand is that it was in a hospital room, far from the crowds and grand celebrations, that Pope Francis delivered his most profound words. He summoned his closest collaborators, looked each of them in the eye, and said something unprecedented in modern Vatican history. Get ready now. This was not a formal directive, nor was it the meticulous planning that typically accompanies a papal transition. It was an urgent command, driven by fear and the certainty that time had run out. Francis recognizes that there is no longer any way to delay the decision, and so, before his voice is silenced forever, he entrusted Clara with his final mission: to prepare the Church for the worst. The succession of a pope is usually a quiet process, conducted behind closed doors in a slow and controlled manner. But this time, the silence has been shattered. Francis, standing before the cardinals, left Atina. He knows he will not live to see the end of this story. He knows the Church of Fatima is crumbling. This is not merely about Francis. It is about an unprecedented spiritual succession, where every man and woman will be called to choose a side. He has warned of the silent apostasy already spreading within the Church. According to him, the next pope could either be the faithful shepherd who confronts this storm, or a wolf in sheep's clothing who leads many away from the truth. This is why Francis is desperate to deliver his message before it is too late. He believes that soon he will no longer be able to speak, and those who inherit the leadership of the Church may not share his intentions. His final plea is for vigilance and resistance, as the time of trial will test not only God, but also the faithful. Francis has also shared insights from within the Vatican. He did not merely provide instructions for selecting a new pope. He sent letters and secret communiques to religious leaders and trusted believers in several countries. In these messages, he emphasized the necessity of constant prayer, genuine penance, and extreme discernment. The Pope is no longer calling for theological debates or diplomatic meetings. He is urging each person to decide which side they are on, as neutrality will soon become impossible. He has also stated that the world will witness increasingly clear signs that the prophecy of Fatima is being fulfilled. Francis speaks of endless wars, natural disasters, nations descending into chaos, and, above all, the loss of faith, even among those who once seemed unshakable. He warns that the next step will be a choice: to follow the truth revealed over 2,000 years ago, or to accept a new order, a system that promises peace and security, but, according to him, will lead to spiritual ruin. Francis does not shy away from acknowledging the high cost of this decision. He predicts that the faithful will face persecution, mockery, and isolation, but he also insists that this is the only way to survive what lies ahead. He reminds us that the Virgin Mary at Fatima promised her Immaculate Heart would ultimately triumph, but not before the world undergoes a painful purification. The Pope, now weakened, stresses that there is no more time for indecision. He believes the next generation of the Church will be composed of either martyrs or apostates, which is why he is pressing so urgently for a response. In his hospital bed, he repeated one final phrase: "The test has begun, and few are prepared." To outsiders, This may seem like the ramblings of a sick man, but to those who understand what was revealed at Fatima, these words resonate like the sound of a trumpet heralding the start of something inevitable. Francis' final mission is not merely to prepare a successor, it is to prepare the Church for its greatest trial in history. And now, the responsibility does not rest solely with him, it rests with us. The time that remains is short. This is not a dramatic statement or a symbolic warning, it is a fact. In his latest statements, Pope Francis did not simply ask for prayers or make vague appeals to faith. He issued a direct and definitive challenge: every person, every believer, every heart must decide which side they are on. Throughout history, many have chosen to ignore clear signs, believing there would always be a tomorrow, that the warnings were exaggerated, or that the time for decision was far off. But now, there is no room for doubt. The Pope, known for his calculated gestures and thoughtful speeches, is convinced that the time of testing has already begun. No one who has heard his words, whether inside or outside the Vatican, can claim ignorance. According to Francis, the future of the Church and humanity will not be determined by closed-door summits or by political and religious leaders. It will be decided by the choices each of us makes. He emphasizes that the most crucial decision will be personal, and that this choice is, above all, spiritual. He refers to this as the final opportunity. Within the quiet halls of the Vatican, there is a growing understanding that the choices made now will determine who remains steadfast in the true faith and who is swayed by the false promise of a world without God. According to the Pope's words, the stage is set, and deception will emerge disguised as hope for progress and peace. However, this deception will come at a cost, abandoning the true faith in favor of a new global order. This is not a conspiracy theory or religious speculation. It is a direct warning from the man who holds the highest position in the Church. Francis does not shy away from stating that what lies ahead will be painful and decisive. He believes that open persecution will arise, and those who remain faithful will be seen as enemies of the world, as obstacles to a supposed greater good. He warns that many will fall, deceived by false leaders and lured by empty promises. Francis has declared that this is the moment when the wheat is separated from the chaff, and the time for indecision has passed. He has made it clear, there will be no more excuses, no more justifications. Either you stand firm in the true faith, or you abandon the path and join the deception. This is the essence of the time of testing. For those who believe it is too early to be concerned, the Pope has issued a final warning. Those who wait for obvious signs before making a decision will already be too late. Within the Vatican, some still attempt to maintain an appearance of normalcy, but those who understand the truth, those who have listened closely to Francis, know that this normalcy is merely the calm before the storm. For you who have followed these revelations up to this point, the question is simple: who do you believe in? Who do you trust? The third secret of Fatima spoke of a time when faith would be attacked from within, when the Church would be divided, and when spiritual chaos would be so profound that many would lose the ability to discern the truth. According to Pope Francis, this time is no longer in the future, it is here, it is happening now. He has issued the warning, but the choice cannot come from him. It must come from you. This is the final decision. Who will remain standing when everything seems to be falling apart? Who will hold on to faith even as the world descends into darkness? Francis believes that after the fall will come the triumph of the Immaculate Heart of Mary, but to achieve this triumph, resistance will be necessary, no matter the cost. Now, the question that can no longer be postponed is this: are you ready to face the hour of testing? If you have come this far, it is not by chance. What has been said is not a hypothesis, a distant theory, or a flexible interpretation. It is a direct call from the man who leads the Catholic Church in its most critical moment. Francis no longer speaks as a head of state or a public figure. He speaks as a man who carries the weight of a secret that can no longer be contained. The Jubilee of 2025 was meant to be a time of celebration, joy, and spiritual renewal. Instead, it has become a sign of urgency, a reminder that the Church is enduring its darkest night, and that humanity is being called to a final awakening. As Francis fights for every breath in his hospital bed, he makes a simple yet profound request: pray for me. Pray for the Church. Pray for the world. This is not a symbolic gesture or an empty act of piety. He believes, with absolute certainty, that the only true weapon against the impending collapse is sincere prayer, genuine conversion, and unwavering faith. He is not speaking to theologians or appealing to diplomats. He is speaking directly to you, because the decision is now personal. The Pope has affirmed that the prophecy of Fatima is not a warning for some distant future. It is being fulfilled today. The time for waiting is over. The time for response is now. The world is already under the shadow of this prophecy. You see it in the signs all around: wars that seem endless, crises that defy logic, and faith crumbling like dust in the hands of those who have lost their way. Yet, there is a promise that remains unchanged: in the end, the Immaculate Heart will triumph. Francis clings to this belief even in his weakened state. He knows that the trial will pass through each of us, through those who resist the pressure, through those who remain faithful even in the darkest days. This is the moment. Not tomorrow, not when it is convenient, because, according to Francis, the time of testing will not end soon, it will only intensify. But those who remain faithful will become the foundation of a new beginning. He asks for prayers, but also for action, prayers that transform, faith that resists, and testimony that fears nothing because it understands that only through such courage can everything be gained. Now, the choice is yours. You can turn away from all of this and continue with your life as it is. Or you can stand up now and be part of the answer, on the right side of history, on the right side of faith. Francis has already done his part. He has already paid the price. Now, it is up to you. Pray, convert, resist, and prepare. The future is not set in stone, but the signs have been given. The Pope has called this the final warning, and for those who have ears to hear, the path is clear.